Why was the old man still watching the door, as though he knew trouble had already chosen this place? The storm hadn't yet peaked, but the diner's neon sign trembled against the rain, bleeding its red and blue glow across the wet asphalt. Inside, the hum of conversation was low, steady, ordinary, too ordinary. Behind the bar, Jack polished a glass with deliberate patience, as though every circle of the cloth steadied the storm inside him. At 68, his hands still moved with the precision of a man who had lived too long on the edge of danger. 30 years a cop, another dozen retired. But his eyes had never retired. They scanned the room the way they always had. Faces, reading gestures, anticipating trouble before it started. And when the door swung open, a gust of cold air rattling the bell above it, Jack's eyes narrowed just slightly. He'd seen too many nights like this. Too many storms where the weather outside only mirrored the one waiting inside. It was Lily Parker who hurried through the door, apron already tied, hair damp with rain. At 26, she looked younger and older all at once. Too many shifts worked, too many debts carried, too many ghosts behind her eyes. She called an apology, breathless, blaming hospital bills and her father's sickness, and Jack just nodded. He didn't need excuses from her. He'd hired her because he recognized something most men missed. Resilience in the bones, the kind that doesn't break even when everything else does. The diner wasn't full, but it wasn't empty. The trucker sat with his usual coffee. A young couple bent over their pie, whispering like the world couldn't touch them. Frank, Jack's old partner, sat alone with his crossword, his joints failing him but his eyes still sharp. They all looked like pieces of a quiet puzzle, but Jack knew better. Nights like this never stayed quiet. And sure enough, the bell rang again. 4 men stepped in, leather jackets dripping rain, patches stitched across their backs like warning signs. The Hell's Angels. Not strangers to Jack. Not enemies anymore, either. Their leader, James Cooper, caught Jack's gaze and nodded once. It was an acknowledgement of history, complicated, violent, unfinished, but it was also respect. James carried himself like his father once had, all steel and flint, but with a restraint the old man never mastered. Behind him trailed soldiers of a different kind. Mike, the ranger still haunted by desert wars. Ray, the mechanic who almost lost himself to needles but found a brotherhood instead. And old and weathered, eyes that had seen jungles most men never came back from. They sat in the corner booth, quiet but not invisible. Men like that never blended in. Jack poured their coffee without asking. Lily served them without flinching. And for a moment the storm outside was louder than the storm inside. But the peace cracked when the door opened again. The man who walked in carried something heavier than rain on his shoulders. His tattoos glistened wet against the dim light, ink crawling across muscles hardened by years in prison. Victor Reeves, a name that once burned across Jack's reports, a man who had promised revenge the night Jack cuffed him a decade ago. Domestic violence. Nearly killed a woman with his bare hands. He looked Jack in the eye then and said he would never forget. Jack had learned to ignore such threats. Most of them were empty. But not this one. Now Victor stood in his diner, eyes sharp, smirk curling as if he already owned the room. He barked for coffee, threw a bill across the counter like it was a leash. Lily poured without a tremor in her hand, but Jack noticed the way she positioned herself just out of reach. He'd seen that body language before, women who'd learned what proximity could cost. Victor leaned close, voice low, words heavy with insinuation. He made her uniform sound like an invitation, her service like a debt. And when Lily walked away, his eyes followed, stripping dignity as casually as he stripped sugar packets across the counter. The diner shifted quietly like the first breath before a fight. The trucker's fists curled on the table. The young couple froze mid-bite. Frank's jaw hardened. From the corner, the angels straightened subtly, like predators catching a scent. Jack kept his hand under the bar, brushing the cold weight of the Colt he'd carried for decades. Victor made a show of grimacing at the coffee. Loud enough for all to hear, he called it garbage. He pushed the cup away, sneering. And then, like a snake testing the air, he reached again for Lily when she came near. This time his hand closed around her wrist. The diner fell silent. Her eyes widened, breath caught but not in surrender. Fear, yes, but also defiance. She told him to let go, her voice steady, controlled. A voice she had built from scars. Victor laughed. He tightened his grip. And then Jack moved. Not fast, not rash, just deliberate, a scrape of a stool, a shift in the air. His voice cut steady through the silence. Enough. No hands on staff, not here, not ever. Victor released Lily slowly with a smirk that dared Jack to push harder. He turned in his seat, eyes scanning, calculating. That was when Jack saw it, the flicker of recognition, the smirk sharpening. "Well, well," Victor said loud now. "Officer, or is it just Jack these days?" Jack didn't flinch. "Depends who's asking." The name carried weight, and the diner felt it. The waitress's scar, the old cop's badge, the biker's codes, the ex-con's grudge, all threads in a storm pulling tight. The rain outside hammered harder. Lightning cut white across the windows. Inside, the air thickened with something older than weather. History, revenge, fear, survival. And Lily, rubbing her wrist, stood in the eye of it. She thought of the knife that once cut her skin, the man who once said she could never leave, the nights she told herself she was fine when she was, and now another hand had wrapped around her, another voice had mocked her dignity. But this time she wasn't alone. Not with the old man watching, not with the bikers rising in unison, not with the storm daring them all to break. Something in her steadied, something she hadn't felt in years. Hoping. And Victor, smiling like the night was his, had no idea that in this place, on this storm's watch, even men like him could be broken. How long could a room stay quiet before it shattered? Victor's smirk lingered in the silence like smoke after a gunshot. His hand no longer gripped Lily's wrist, but the ghost of it burned red on her skin. She pulled her sleeve down, hiding the mark, though everyone in the diner had already seen it. That was the thing about men like him, they didn't just bruise flesh. They branded shame. Jack's voice was calm even, but the weight behind it was unyielding. "You've had your coffee, now move along." Victor leaned back on the stool, shoulders relaxed, smile sharp. He let his eyes wander the diner, fists on the table, Frank's steady gaze, the couple frozen in uneasy silence, the bikers coiled like wolves in the corner. His smirk widened. He was testing boundaries, daring someone to break first. "You know," Victor drawled, "I spent 8 years thinking about this moment, wondering what it'd be like to see your face again. Figured you'd be dead by now. Guess retirement didn't kill you as fast as I thought." Jack didn't move. He'd learned long ago that silence could cut deeper than words. Victor's gaze slid to Lily. "But look at this. Fate's funny, huh? Walk into a hole in the wall for a cup of coffee and find out the waitress is prettier than anything I saw in prison. And tougher, too. I like that." Lily didn't flinch, though every nerve screamed at her, too. She met his stare with a steady look, chin lifted just slightly. Inside, her pulse pounded like a war drum. The scar beneath her sleeve seemed to burn, reminding her of the last time a man cornered her. But this time she had something she didn't then, people watching, people willing to step in. Still, her breath caught when Victor reached across the counter again, this time not for her wrist but for the sugar jar. He spilled it deliberately, white grains scattering like broken glass across the wood. "Messy," he said, eyes locked on hers. "But sometimes messy's worth it." The stool scraped behind him. James Cooper stood. The sound was small, simple, but in the thick air of the diner it was louder than thunder. His men followed in unison, leather creaking, patches catching the flicker of neon. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their bodies spoke for them. Victor noticed. He froze for just a fraction of a second. His smirk faltered. Then pride forced it back. "What's this?" he sneered. "Bikers playing Boy Scouts, this ain't your business." James stepped forward once. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of steel. "She's our business." Victor's smirk faltered again, but he covered it with a laugh, sharp and empty. "You think I'm scared of jackets and patches. I dealt with worse inside. You don't know what I had to do to survive." "That's the problem," James replied. "You think survival makes you strong. Real strength is knowing when to stop." Jack's hand dipped just slightly below the bar, brushing the Colt hidden there. He hadn't drawn it yet, but everyone could feel it waiting. The old man's presence wasn't loud, wasn't showy, but it was unshakable. He'd been in rooms like this before. He knew how quickly blood spilled when pride met steel. The rain outside pounded harder, hammering the windows like fists demanding entry. The storm had found its rhythm, and inside the diner, so had the people caught in its gravity. Lily wiped the spilled sugar with trembling fingers, more to keep moving than to clean. Her heart ached with the memory of another night, another storm, another man who cornered her in silence while everyone else looked away. But this wasn't that night. This time, people weren't looking away. Still, fear had its voice, a whisper inside her that asked, what if they can't stop him? What if this is how it happens all over again? She pushed the thought aside, held onto Jack's steady gaze, held onto the way the biker's eyes never left Victor, held onto the fact that she wasn't powerless anymore. Victor rose from the stool slowly, like a predator stretching its muscles. He was taller than most, broad-shouldered, but his eyes betrayed him. They were restless, searching, calculating. He wasn't in control, and he knew it. That was why his smile looked forced now. "Well," he said, voice loud again, filling the diner, "this has been fun. Family reunion, coffee, new friends." He spread his arms mockingly. "But I'll be back, count on it." He brushed past Sarah, who had just walked in, rain plastering her hair to her jacket. Detective badge tucked beneath civilian clothes, but her posture screamed authority. She froze at the sight of Victor, hand instinctively shifting toward her hip where her weapon rested. Recognition flashed across her eyes. "Victor Reeves," she said, voice flat. Victor smirked. "Detective, guess it runs in the family. Daddy cop, daughter cop." He shouldered past her deliberately on his way to the door, just hard enough to make a point. Sarah let him go. Her eyes followed him out, but her hand never left her hip. The bell jingled, the door slammed shut. Silence again. Jack exhaled slowly, lowering the hand that hovered near his Colt. James eased back into his booth. The storm outside swallowed Victor's retreat, but no one believed it was over, not by a long shot. Sarah approached the counter, eyes on her father. What the hell was he doing here? Jack's voice was low, almost a growl, looking for trouble. "He'll find it," Sarah muttered. Lily pulled the rag across the counter, scrubbing sugar that wouldn't disappear. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't when she whispered, "He already did." For a moment nobody spoke. The storm outside roared. Inside, the weight of history pressed down on everyone, Jack's old battles, James's inherited scars, Sarah's duty, Lily's survival. And in the middle of it all, a single truth pulsed like a heartbeat. Victor Reeves would be back. And when he came, the storm inside the diner would finally break. Why had the storm grown louder the moment he left, as if the night itself refused to believe Victor Reeves was gone? The bell had long since stilled, but Lily's pulse hadn't. She wiped the counter again and again, scrubbing sugar grains into invisible streaks, her hands moving faster than her thoughts. Every time she blinked, she saw his face, that smirk, that grip, that moment her body betrayed her by remembering too much. "You okay?" Sarah asked softly, standing near the counter now, badge tucked away but authority unmistakable. Lily swallowed. She wanted to say yes, to give the automatic answer she'd always given, but the word caught in her throat. She pressed her sleeve down over her wrist instead. "I'm fine," she whispered. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's not the same as being safe. From the corner booth, James Cooper's gravelly voice carried across the room. "Safe's not what this place is tonight." His men shifted around him, restless wolves packing the edge of firelight. Their cups were empty, but none of them asked for refills. Their eyes kept flicking to the door, waiting for the storm's next strike. Jack reemerged from the back, shoulders tight, lines deepening around his eyes. He didn't ask what he already knew. He'd seen enough in Lily's face. Instead, he went to the wall, the photographs, the memories he rarely let anyone touch. His fingers brushed the frame of one picture, a young woman with chestnut hair, smiling but fragile. Jessica Cooper. James's jaw tightened when he saw it. "Don't," he muttered, but the old man's hand lingered anyway. "You think I don't remember," Jack said quietly. "She worked here same as Lily. Same smile, same silence. I told myself I'd keep her safe, but I was too late." His voice cracked just once before he buried it beneath the weight of a man who'd lived too long with regret. Lily froze, rag still in her hand. She'd heard whispers of Jessica before, but never this clearly, never spoken with such raw edges. She saw the way James looked at the picture, not with nostalgia, but with guilt carved deep. It hit her then, the photograph wasn't just memory. It was a warning. History didn't just repeat, it stalked. The oldest of the bikers broke the silence with a low rasp. "Some men get born mean, some get made mean. Victor, he's both. And men like that, they don't quit, not until somebody makes them." The rain slammed harder against the windows as if punctuating his words. Lightning flickered, illuminating every face in harsh flashes. Lily shivered. For a moment she saw them not as trucker, cop, waitress, bikers, but as survivors, each carrying scars invisible and heavy. Her own scar burned under her sleeve. The jagged line had left her 3 years ago, the night he taught her how far cruelty could go when it thought no one was watching. She remembered the knife glinting in the kitchen light, the neighbors who ignored the screams until it was almost too late, the way her own blood had stained the floor. She had sworn she'd never feel powerless again. And yet, tonight, Victor's hand had dragged her right back to that place. Except it wasn't the same, because this time people had stood. Jack, Sarah, James, Evan's weathered hand offering her his jacket when shame threatened to strip her bare. They had all seen, and none of them had turned away. For the first time in years, the loneliness cracked. "Coffee?" Lily asked quietly, more to steady herself than anything else. She moved between tables, pouring, serving, trying to stitch the moment back into something normal. But normal was gone. Every sound was too sharp now, every flash of lightning too bright, every shadow on the glass a possible return. At's booth, the trucker reached out, covering her hand briefly. "You let Jack know if he bothers you again," he said, his voice rough but kind. "Some men need reminding about manners." Lily nodded. The kindness almost undid her. At Frank's table, the old detective scribbled into his crossword, but his eyes never left her. "7 across," he murmured. "Word for vigilance, never off duty." He tapped his pen once, then looked at her over the rim of his glasses. "That's the word, girl, vigilant." Her throat tightened. "Thanks, Frank." Back at the counter, Sarah leaned in toward Jack, speaking low. "He's escalating. He came here looking for something, and I don't think it was just you." Jack's jaw set. "He's looking for control. Men like him can't stand losing it." His eyes flicked toward Lily. He saw something he thought he could take. "He'll be back," Sarah said flatly. Jack didn't disagree. The storm cracked overhead, thunder rolling so hard it rattled the windows. The lights flickered, dimmed, steadied again. For a moment, everyone glanced upward, waiting for darkness to swallow them. Lily hugged jacket around her shoulders. She wasn't cold, not really, but the weight of it grounded her, made her feel less exposed. When the bell jingled again, her breath stopped. But it wasn't Victor. It was only the wind rattling the old door frame. The relief was sharp, but it didn't last, because the fear wasn't just about him coming back. It was about when. She found herself glancing at Jack. He stood steady, but his eyes were far away, calculating, rehearsing outcomes the way only a man who had lived through too many could. Beside him, Sarah's jaw tightened, hand resting near her weapon even in stillness. In the booth, James's men whispered low, every shift of their posture less casual than the last. The diner had changed. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a waiting room, waiting for violence, waiting for him. And Lily realized something as she poured coffee into her own cup, just to keep her hands busy. She was tired of waiting, tired of scars defining her, tired of pretending she was fine, tired of letting fear write her story. Her voice, when it came, surprised even herself. "If he comes back," she hesitated, then steadied, "I won't run, not this time." The room stilled, every face turned toward her. Jack's eyes softened, but his reply was steel. "You don't have to fight him, Lily. That's not your burden." But James, still in his booth, leaned forward, studying her with that unreadable gaze. "Sometimes it's not about fighting. Sometimes it's about standing. And sometimes that's enough." Lily met his gaze, and for the first time all night she believed it. The storm outside raged. The neon sign sputtered, and somewhere in the darkness beyond, Victor Reeves carried his grudge like a weapon. He would come back. And when he did, she wouldn't be the same girl he thought he could break. Why did the door feel like a loaded gun, every swing promising the trigger might finally pull? The storm outside had built into a frenzy, lightning carving harsh lines through the windows, thunder rattling plates on the shelves. Inside, the diner breathed in uneasy silence. People sipped coffee they didn't taste. Conversations started and died in half-formed whispers. Even the jukebox in the corner had gone quiet, its usual hum drowned by the pounding of rain. Lily wiped the same table twice, her hand moving in circles that never seemed to finish. She caught herself staring at the door too often, counting the seconds between lightning strikes and waiting for the silhouette she dreaded. When she realized she was holding her breath again, she forced herself to exhale. "You're not the girl you used to be. You're not that cornered girl anymore." But fear didn't listen to reason. From his booth, James Cooper watched her with an expression somewhere between study and memory. He didn't speak, but his presence pressed against the room like a shadow. His men sat coiled around him, restless, too quiet for men who once thrived on noise and speed. Tapped the side of his coffee cup like a war drum, his eyes never leaving the windows. Mike kept scanning exits, his military-trained gaze twitching with every sound. Ray fiddled with a butter knife, spinning it between his fingers with an intensity that made even Lily uneasy. Jack moved behind the bar with practiced calm, but Lily knew him well enough by now to read the small tells, the subtle tightness in his jaw, the way his hand kept brushing the space beneath the counter where old Bess waited. He was ready, but ready didn't mean safe. Sarah sat near the counter, sipping her coffee black. Her posture screamed cop, her eyes never at rest. She caught Lily watching her and said softly, "He'll be back. Men like him don't walk away from unfinished business." Lily swallowed, nodding. The words were blunt, but they carried no malice, just truth, and she preferred truth to empty comfort. It came faster than anyone expected. The door chimed. Rain and cold air rushed in with the figure that filled the entrance, Victor Reeves. He stood dripping in the doorway, dark hair plastered to his head, eyes glittering with cruel triumph. His smile stretched wide as if the storm itself had carried him back. "Forgot my change," he said, voice smooth, mocking. The diner froze. Every person turned to him. Every breath seemed to stop. Lily's grip tightened on the rag in her hand. She forced her voice steady. "I can get it for you. Just tell me how much it was." Victor walked forward slowly, savoring the tension that bent the air. He leaned on the counter, dripping water across it, lowering his voice so only she and Jack could hear. "Don't worry about the money, sweetheart. I came back for something else." His eyes flicked to her sleeve, the scar hidden beneath. His smile widened. "I like women who carry marks. They tell stories. Maybe I'll write a new one on you." Jack's hand dropped beneath the counter. "That's enough." His voice was steady, but the barrel of years behind it made the air vibrate. "You're leaving, now." Victor tilted his head, mocking. "Funny, that's not what your daughter would say." The room shifted at once. Sarah rose, hand moving to her hip where her weapon rested beneath her jacket. James's men leaned forward as one. The air thickened until it was ready to snap. But Victor was faster than anyone expected. His hand shot out, grabbing Lily's wrist and yanking her forward across the counter. She gasped, rag falling from her hand, coffee mugs crashing to the floor. "You should be more careful," Victor hissed, his grip twisting cruelly. "Pretty girls get hurt when they're not." Lily's heart thundered. Fear rose like bile in her throat, but this time anger rose with it. She jerked against his grip, defiance cracking through her fear. "Let me go." Victor's smile stretched, teeth bared. "Or what?" The diner erupted. Jack moved from behind the counter, Colt already in his hand, its barrel steady, eyes like iron. "Now," he said, voice cold as stone. At the same time, James rose from his booth, his men flanking him like a tide. Their boots scraped against the floor, leather jackets creaking. The Hell's Angels straightened in perfect unison, patches blazing red and white in the dim light. Victor faltered for the first time. The smile wavered. His grip loosened slightly. "Let her go." James's voice was a blade, each word sharp, deliberate, unarguable. Victor sneered. "This isn't your business." James stepped forward once, his men spreading out behind him like wolves forming a line. "In this diner on this night, she is our business." His voice never wavered. "Last chance, take your hands off her, walk away." The silence stretched. Thunder rolled like cannon fire outside. Victor's pride wouldn't let him retreat. He yanked Lily closer, his free hand grabbing her shirt. Fabric tore, the sound brutal, humiliating. She gasped, arms instinctively crossing her chest, face burning with fury and shame. Time fractured. The entire diner stilled in that moment, the rip of fabric, the flash of skin, the humiliation echoing louder than thunder. Then came the scrape of boots. James stepped forward. Victor saw it, panic flickering behind his eyes. He shoved Lily away, sending her stumbling into Jack's arms. "This isn't over," he spat, backing toward the door, venom dripping from every word. "Not by a long shot." Lily pulled leather jacket around herself, humiliation scorching her, but beneath it something else burned hotter. Rage. Not the kind that destroyed, but the kind that forged. She looked him dead in the eye, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "It is over, and if you touch me again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." Victor faltered. For a fraction of a second, doubt cracked his mask. Then he turned, shoving through the door, vanishing into the storm. The bell jingled cheerfully, mocking the silence he left behind. Inside, the air vibrated with what almost happened, what still might. Jack lowered his weapon but kept it close. James stood still, eyes on the door, jaw clenched. His men relaxed only slightly, shoulders still tense, fists half-curled. Old and grizzled moved first. He shrugged off his jacket, stepped toward Lily and draped it over her torn shirt with surprising gentleness. "Here, girl," he said quietly, "cover up." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." Jack touched her shoulder. "You okay?" Her voice shook, but the words didn't. "I will be." She believed it this time. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating Victor's figure as he disappeared into the rain. Inside, unlikely allies stood together, a retired cop, his detective daughter, 4 bikers, a waitress with scars. Different codes, different pasts. But on this night, under this storm, they shared one truth. Victor Reeves would be back. And when he returned, the true storm would begin. Why did silence always feel heavier after a man had walked out promising revenge? The bell above the diner door had long since stilled, but Victor Reeves's shadow clung to the room like smoke after fire. Every person inside carried it differently. Jack with his jaw locked tight, Sarah packing slow and sharp near the windows, James and his men leaning back with the stillness of wolves who knew the hunt wasn't over. Lily felt it most of all. His jacket draped across her shoulders, too big, too heavy, yet exactly what she needed. She clutched it closed with trembling hands, her shirt beneath torn open where Victor's grip had ripped away dignity as casually as cloth. Shame flushed her cheeks, but it was different this time. It didn't consume her, didn't cage her. It burned like fuel, mixing with something else she hadn't felt in years. Anger. Jack's voice broke the silence first. Everybody sit down. Not loud, but steady, commanding. It was the voice of a man who had once led men into rooms full of danger and walked them out alive. He didn't ask. He ordered. Slowly people obeyed, slid back into his booth, hands still fists. The young couple whispered to each other, frightened eyes darting toward the door. Frank folded his crossword neatly, though the pen in his hand still trembled. James and his men shifted back into their booth, though their posture stayed sharp, like springs held under pressure. Jack turned his gaze to Lily. "You're safe here," he said. The words sounded simple, too simple. Her laugh cracked, thin and brittle. "Safe, did you see what he just did?" Jack didn't flinch. "I saw, and I saw what didn't happen, too. You didn't break, you didn't run." His eyes softened just slightly. "You're stronger than you think." The words hit harder than she expected, stronger than she thought. The scar on her arm whispered otherwise. The nights she'd hidden in her car after fists found her again said otherwise. And yet, standing here now, wrapped in someone else's jacket, surrounded by strangers who hadn't looked away, she wondered if maybe Jack was right. Sarah stopped packing. "He's coming back," she said flatly. "Men like that don't make promises they don't intend to keep." James nodded, his voice low. "And he won't come alone. Victor Reeves doesn't walk into a fight without backup. He's probably making calls right now." "Backup?" asked, voice shaking. Sarah looked at him. "Ex-cons, drifters, people who owe him favors, maybe worse." Lily's chest tightened. "So what do we do? Just wait for them to show up?" Jack's eyes flicked to the door, then to the storm hammering the windows. "We don't run. This is my place, my ground. He picked it for a reason, but so did we. We make our stand here." James leaned back, studying Jack with something like approval. "Didn't think you still had fight in you, old man." Jack's mouth curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. "Fight never leaves. It just waits." For a moment, tension eased. The men exchanged looks. Even Sarah allowed herself the briefest exhale. But it didn't last. The storm outside was building still, louder, heavier, as if it knew what the night demanded. Lily excused herself to the back, into the narrow staff hallway lined with hooks and a cracked mirror. She closed the door softly and leaned against it, hands shaking. She pulled his jacket, but her reflection in the mirror still showed the torn shirt beneath, skin exposed, scar visible. She hated it. She hated that a man could strip dignity with nothing but his hand. She hated that the scar left still dictated how she saw herself. And she hated that tonight, in front of all of them, Victor had ripped her open again. Her breath came fast. She pressed her hands to the sink, gripping hard until her knuckles whitened. For a moment, tears threatened. But then she remembered the look in Jack's eyes when he told her she hadn't broken. She remembered the way James's men rose, unflinching, when she was in danger. She remembered Sarah stepping between her and the storm without hesitation. And she remembered her own voice, steady and sharp, telling Victor it was over. She hadn't run, she hadn't begged, she had stood. She wiped her eyes and straightened. When she returned to the dining room, the hum of conversation had returned, but low, cautious, every voice carrying the weight of waiting. Jack caught her eye. His nod was small but enough. Sarah gave her a quick glance, professional but approving. And grizzled, tired, just patted the seat beside him, offering a place in the circle. She sat. James leaned forward, voice rough. "We need to be ready. If Victor comes back with numbers, it won't just be fists. He'll want to make an example. Men like him thrive on humiliation. If we show fear, he wins before it starts. And if we fight, Sarah asked, then we make sure he knows what real resistance looks like. Lily listened, heart thundering. She wasn't a soldier, wasn't a cop, wasn't a biker. But in that booth, listening to them speak, she realized something she hadn't felt in years. She belonged. Not because they needed her, but because they chose to stand with her. The storm cracked again, the windows rattling. Frank muttered under his breath, "Feels like a war out there." "It is," Jack said quietly. Time dragged. Every minute felt like an hour. Every set of headlights that passed on the highway sent pulses of adrenaline through the room. Lily found herself gripping her coffee cup, breath quickening every time the bell above the door jingled from the wind. Then finally, the sound they had all been waiting for. Engines. Distant at first, growing louder. Dozens, maybe more. The roar of motorcycles cutting through the storm like thunder on command. Lily's stomach dropped. She looked at James, who had already risen, eyes hard. His men stood with him, jackets shifting, boots planted. Jack moved behind the counter, hand hovering near old Bess. Sarah stepped to the window, peering out, then cursed softly. "They're here." The headlights appeared through the rain, a swarm of them, circling like predators around prey. The storm outside had nothing on the storm that had arrived. Lily's pulse raced. Fear rose again, sharp, suffocating. But beneath it, steady as a drum, was something else: determination. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. And if tonight was the night Victor Reeves wanted his revenge, then tonight was the night she would finally take back her dignity. The engines cut outside. Silence fell heavy. The siege had begun. Why did silence always feel more dangerous than the roar of engines? The storm had gone quiet. The rain still poured, lightning still flashed, but the sound that filled the diner now was absence, the sudden halt of motorcycle engines outside. Like predators circling, then stopping, crouched before the strike. Inside, every breath was measured. Sarah crouched near the window, peering through the glass. She caught glimpses of figures moving in the shadows, leather jackets slick with rain, faces obscured by helmets, chains glinting in the lightning. Not one or two, dozens. "They're surrounding us," she whispered. Jack stood behind the counter, Colt steady in his hand, gaze fixed on the door. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Stay away from the windows. Don't give them a target." James Cooper and his men rose as one, spreading out across the diner. Near the door, Ray flanking the jukebox, Mike and Tom by the booths. They didn't draw weapons yet, but their posture, the way their eyes sharpened, said enough. These weren't men unused to war. They had lived it in different ways, and tonight it had come knocking again. Lily sat frozen in her seat, his jacket still wrapped around her. Her hands clutched the fabric tight, her breath shallow. She told herself not to panic, not to let fear own her again. But her scar burned beneath the sleeve, and the memory of Victor's hand ripping her shirt replayed in her head like a cruel loop. Sarah glanced at her, then crouched beside her. "Hey, look at me." Lily lifted her eyes, trembling. "You're not alone," Sarah said, steady, sure. "Whatever happens, you're not alone." Lily nodded, just barely. The first sound came like a hammer. A chain slapping against the door, metal on wood, once, twice, then harder. Jack's grip tightened on the Colt. His voice was low, iron steady. "They want us scared, don't give it to them." Then came Victor's voice, muffled through the storm but loud enough to slice the silence. "Jack, thought you could hide behind four walls and old friends. Thought a couple of bikers and a waitress could stop me." Lily's chest constricted. Victor's voice rose, ugly, triumphant. "Open the door, hand her over, or we come in and take her." The diner shook with the force of every heart inside it. Jack's answer was immediate: "You're not getting her." Victor laughed, cruel and sharp. "Then you'll all pay for her, one by one." The first rock hit the window, glass spiderwebbed, shards spilling onto the counter. Lily flinched back, heart hammering. Another rock followed, then another, until the front of the diner rattled with impacts. James barked to his men. "Positions!" The angels spread out, covering the room like a living barricade. Braced the door, shoulders wide, every muscle coiled. Ray snatched a chair, flipped it, and wedged it against the back exit. Mike crouched low, eyes sharp on the windows. Sarah drew her weapon, checked the chamber, then glanced at Jack. "They're escalating fast." Jack nodded grimly. "That's how he operates. Break the walls, then break the people." Lily's breath came fast, panic clawing at her throat. She pressed her back to the booth, nails digging into the leather seat. But she forced herself not to close her eyes. She wouldn't hide from this. Not again. The next sound wasn't a rock. It was glass shattering. A brick flew through the front window, crashing onto the floor. The wind howled in through the jagged hole, rain splattering across the counter. "Stay back," Sarah shouted, raising her gun. Through the broken glass, Victor's face appeared for a split second, lit by lightning. His smirk was wider now, fueled by the swarm at his back. "Tick-tock, old man. Tick-tock." Then the pounding began. Fists, boots, chains against the walls, the doors, the windows. The entire diner shook under the assault, the storm outside joining their chaos. It wasn't just noise, it was pressure. The kind meant to crush hope before the first blow landed. But Jack didn't waver. He raised his Colt, gaze locked on the door. "They want us broken, don't give it to them." James stepped forward, his men flanking him like shadows. "Let them come. They'll learn what real walls are." The pounding grew louder, harder. The doorframe cracked. Wood splintered. Braced it with his full weight, jaw clenched, veins bulging in his neck. "They're gonna break it," he shouted. Sarah crouched beside him, gun steady. "They'll have to get through me first." Lily's body trembled, but inside something shifted. Fear was still there, sharp and suffocating, but beneath it a spark flared. She thought of the night she'd almost died. She thought of every time she'd stayed silent, swallowed her pride, lived small to stay safe. And she thought of Victor, his grip, his words, the rip of fabric that should have destroyed her but hadn't. She wasn't the same girl anymore. Her voice cracked the storm. "He doesn't get to take me." Everyone turned to her. Lily stood, jacket falling open, her scar visible now under the torn sleeve. She didn't hide it this time. She let it show. "He doesn't get to take me," she repeated, louder now. Victor's voice carried through the door. "Then I'll tear that place apart until you crawl out on your knees." Jack's gaze flicked to Lily. For the first time tonight he smiled, just faintly. "No, Victor, not tonight." The door shuddered, hinges groaned. Then with a violent crack it burst open. Stumbled back as figures surged through the entry, soaked bikers, chains swinging, boots stomping. Chaos exploded inside. Sarah fired once into the ceiling, the blast deafening, halting the first rush. "Back!" she shouted, weapon steady, eyes blazing. James and his men moved forward, fists and boots striking, bodies slamming intruders back. Chairs crashed, tables toppled, glass shattered. The diner became a every inch contested, every sound violence and defiance. Lily ducked behind the counter, heart racing, but her eyes never left the fight. Fear pounded in her chest, but so did something else. Hope. Because for the first time in her life, when the world tried to strip her bare, she wasn't standing alone. Why did violence always sound the same, no matter the year, no matter the place? The crash of glass, the grunt of fists, the thud of bodies meeting walls, it was a language older than words. And tonight the diner spoke it fluently. The door had given way. Victor's men poured through, shadows with boots and chains, their rain-slicked jackets dripping across the tiles. They came in wild, roaring, sure of their numbers, sure of the fear they carried with them. But they hadn't counted on what was waiting. Sarah was the first to answer. She moved like lightning, sidestepping the first intruder, slamming her shoulder into his chest, gun pressed hard to his temple. "Back!" she barked. The command cracked through the chaos, sharp as thunder. Another man lunged toward her, and she swung the butt of her pistol across his jaw, sending him sprawling into a booth. Jack fired a warning shot into the ceiling, plaster raining down. The noise froze half the room. His Colt never wavered. His eyes burned cold steel. "This is my ground," he said, voice low, steady. "You don't walk through it without consequence." But the flood didn't stop. Too many. They surged around Sarah and Jack, spilling into the diner like water through cracks. Tables flipped, coffee mugs shattered. James and his men rose as one, the Hell's Angels slamming into the invaders with fists and fury. Caught the first with a punch so heavy it knocked the man flat. Ray grabbed a chain mid-swing, yanked it free, and drove his elbow into its wielder's gut. Mike and Tom fought side by side, striking low, fast, efficient, every move practiced through years of brawls they'd sworn they left behind. The diner became a storm inside a storm. Lily crouched low behind the counter, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else. She wanted to hide. Every instinct screamed at her to curl small, invisible. But above the counter she saw stagger, two men pressing him against the wall. She saw Sarah forced back, gun knocked from her hand as three men cornered her. She saw Jack, still standing firm but alone, his Colt swinging in every direction. And she saw Victor. He hadn't rushed in like the others. He stood in the doorway, rain behind him, watching with that cruel smile. He didn't need to fight. Not yet. He wanted her to see. He wanted her to watch as his men tore her protectors apart. Something broke in Lily. Not fear, not shame. The opposite. A fire she'd buried years ago roared to life. She stood. Her hands shook, but she grabbed what she could, a coffee pot still half full, its glass hot from the machine. She gripped it tight, her arm aching, and stepped out from behind the counter. One of Victor's men lunged toward Sarah, raising a chain. Lily didn't think. She moved. She swung the pot with every ounce of fury inside her. It shattered against his head, coffee and glass exploding across the floor. The man collapsed with a grunt, clutching his face. Every eye turned. Victor's smirk faltered. Lily's chest heaved, adrenaline flooding her veins. "You don't get to take me," she shouted, voice cracking but loud, steady. "Not now, not ever." For a moment the chaos stilled. The storm outside howled. Inside something shifted. Sarah scrambled to her feet, grabbing her gun. "That's right," she growled. "She's not yours to take." She fired into the floor, forcing the men around her to retreat. James barked like a commander. "Push them back." His men surged forward, fists and boots driving invaders toward the broken doorway. Roared, slamming a man into the jukebox so hard it cracked, the music sputtering into static. Ray whipped the stolen chain in wide arcs, clearing space with every swing. Jack moved forward, Colt steady. He didn't waste bullets. Every shot was warning, control, authority. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to hold. And Lily moved again. She grabbed another mug, hurled it at a man reaching for Sarah. She snatched a broken chair leg, holding it like a weapon, her hands trembling but her stance unyielding. Victor finally stepped inside. His eyes locked on hers. The smirk returned, darker now. "You think a waitress with a scar can stop me?" His voice dripped venom. Lily raised the chair leg, her arm trembling but steady. "Try me." The fight raged around them. Shouts, grunts, crashes. But in that moment the diner felt like it held only two people. Victor, dripping rain and cruelty, and Lily, scar visible, dignity blazing. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate. His men tried to follow, but James's crew blocked them, fists flying. Sarah fired again, driving the crowd back. Jack stepped closer, Colt raised, but Victor sneered. "Shoot me, old man, and they'll all fall on you." Lily tightened her grip on the chair leg. Her fear screamed. But louder still was the voice inside her that had waited years to be heard. Not again. Not ever again. Victor reached for her. She swung. The chair leg cracked across his arm. He staggered back, shock flashing across his face. He hadn't expected resistance, not from her, not from the girl he thought he'd already broken. "You'll regret that," he snarled. But Lily didn't lower her weapon. Her hands shook, tears burning her eyes, but her voice came steady. "No, I won't." Behind her, Sarah shouted, "Fall back to the booths, hold the line." James's men herded the invaders toward the doorway, blows landing heavy. Jack fired another warning shot, the sound cracking through the storm. Victor's men faltered. One by one, they stumbled back, dragging their injured with them. Their numbers had felt endless when they came in, but now, faced with resistance, with defiance they hadn't expected, they broke. Victor stood in the doorway, chest heaving, rain dripping from his hair. His smirk had twisted into something uglier: hatred. "This isn't done," he spat. "You hear me? None of you walk away clean, especially her." His eyes burned into Lily. Then he turned, shoving past his men, retreating into the storm. The engines roared again outside, fatting into the night. Inside, the diner was wreckage. Tables broken, glass everywhere, blood staining the tiles. The storm still pounded the walls, but inside, the silence afterward was heavier than the fight. Lily stood frozen, the chair leg still in her grip, her arm trembling. Her chest heaved, tears streaming down her face. But she didn't let go. Sarah approached slowly, lowering her weapon. She placed a steady hand on Lily's shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. Lily shook her head. I thought I couldn't." "You stood," Sarah said firmly. "That's what matters, you stood." James's men regrouped, battered but alive, slumped into a booth, breathing hard. Ray wiped blood from his knuckles with a grin. "Not bad for a night's work," he muttered. Jack holstered his Colt, stepping close to Lily. His eyes softened, voice quiet but sure. "He didn't take you, he never will." Lily finally loosened her grip. The chair leg clattered to the floor. She sank into the booth, exhausted, tears running unchecked. But beneath the tears something glowed, a strength she hadn't known she still carried. The storm outside raged on, but inside dignity had spoken. And it hadn't whispered. Why did the silence after violence always feel louder than the fight itself? The diner was wreckage. Tables lay broken, coffee pooled across the floor, shards of glass glittered like ice in the dim light. The jukebox sputtered static before falling quiet for good. The storm outside had softened, its fury draining away, leaving only steady rain tapping against the windows like a heartbeat. Inside, no one moved at first. Every chest rose and fell heavy, every pair of eyes still wide from adrenaline. They had survived the rush, the chaos, the siege. But the air was thick with the truth. Survival came with scars. James's men slumped into booths, sweat and blood mixing with rainwater. Pressed a rag to his knuckles, muttering under his breath. Ray leaned back, exhaling hard, chains still wrapped around his fist like a snake reluctant to let go. Mike and Tom checked each other's cuts, silent, the kind of silence only men who'd seen too much could carry. Sarah reloaded her weapon with slow, deliberate motions. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders square, but her eyes betrayed the weight pressing down on her. She looked at the door often, as though expecting it to open again, as though Victor's shadow still lingered just beyond. And Jack stood behind the counter, old Bess resting on the wood. His hands shook faintly as he wiped her clean, the first tremor Lily had seen in him all night. He looked older suddenly, not weaker, just older. A man who had carried more than his share and tonight had carried again. Lily sat in the corner booth, his jacket still draped across her shoulders. Her arm lay bare now, the torn sleeve forgotten. She hadn't covered it when the fight ended. For the first time in years, she hadn't tried to hide it. She stared at her reflection in the darkened window. A woman with messy hair, swollen eyes, clothes torn and skin marked by scars both old and new. But behind the wreckage, she saw something she hadn't recognized in herself for a long time. Strength. Her hands still shook, but her voice didn't when she finally spoke. "I thought he'd take everything from me again." Everyone turned, listening. "But he didn't," she whispered. She swallowed hard, the words catching, but she forced them out. "Not this time, not ever again." Jack set Old Bess down gently. "You stood, Lily. That's what matters." Sarah's voice was firm. "Standing is the hardest part." James leaned forward, bruised but unbowed. "Victor wanted to show you were weak. Instead, he showed us all just how strong you are." Lily shook her head, tears welling. "I wasn't strong alone. I saw all of you. I saw how none of you backed down. You didn't even know me, but you still stood for me." Grunted, "That's what you do. You stand. Sometimes for yourself. Sometimes for the one next to you. Doesn't matter, you just stand." The room went quiet again, but it wasn't the heavy silence of fear this time. It was softer, full of breath, full of something close to peace. Outside, the storm broke. The rain eased into drizzle, the clouds beginning to part, a faint glow pressing against the horizon. Dawn creeping in, slow but steady. Sarah walked to the door, stepping over broken glass. She looked out at the empty road, only wet tire marks left by Victor's retreat. Her voice was low, meant more for herself than the room. "He'll come back. Men like him don't let go." Jack joined her, resting one hand on the frame. "Then we'll be ready." Sarah turned to Lily. "And so will you." Lily's throat tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, so will I." She stood, walking slowly through the wreckage, picking up broken cups, righting a chair. Her body ached, her skin burned where Victor's hand had torn fabric away, but every small act of order felt like reclamation. The diner wasn't just Jack's ground anymore. Tonight, it had become hers too. James rose, gathering his men. They moved toward the door, battered but proud. At the threshold, he paused, looking back at Lily. "You've got family now, whether you asked for it or not." Lily blinked against tears, smiling faintly. "I think I needed it." James nodded once, a silent promise, then stepped into the clearing dawn. His men followed, boots splashing through puddles, engines rumbling to life in the distance. Their sound didn't threaten this time. It steadied. Sarah holstered her weapon, walking over to Jack. "You'll need to file a report. There'll be questions." Jack smirked faintly, shaking his head. "There are always questions. Answers don't always help." Sarah gave him a look, half warning, half weary respect, then glanced back at Lily. "Take care of yourself. You've earned that much." When she left, the diner grew still again. Just Jack and Lily now, the wreckage around them, the first rays of morning painting the broken glass gold. Lily turned to him, voice soft. "Do you think it's really over?" Jack didn't answer right away. He walked behind the counter, poured her a cup of coffee into a mug with a crack down the side, and set it in front of her. Then he finally spoke. "It's never over, not really. Men like Victor don't disappear, but it doesn't matter." He met her eyes. "What matters is this: tonight he tried to take your dignity, and you showed him it isn't his to take." Lily held the mug in both hands, warmth seeping into her palms. Tears blurred her vision, but she let them fall. They weren't tears of shame this time. They were something closer to release. She sipped the coffee, bitter but grounding, and whispered, "Thank you." Jack shook his head. "Don't thank me, you did it, you stood." The storm outside had passed. The light grew stronger. The diner, broken as it was, stood unbowed, and so did she. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.